Most of the time when you're creating visual effects, you will likely want to add those effects to existing pieces of footage. That could be footage of a gun battle, of a magical fairy transformation, or of your Uncle Bob popping open a can of beans with lasers shooting from his lazy eye. You may want to use stock footage elements for explosions or sparkles, or work with images and audio files that you got off the internet. Importing your footage is usually the very first step to creating your visual effects. Therefore, let's jump into Adobe After Effects and talk about how to import all of your media files into your project. Here we are back in Adobe After Effects, exactly where we left off in the last lesson. And before we get into anything, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come into my project panel and delete this comp 1 that we've created. As I said, we will talk about how to create compositions properly and all of that settings in the next lesson. For now, let's focus on how we can get all of our media into our project. The most obvious way to import your footage is to come up into the main menu bar, and under File you will find Import, and in here you'll find a whole bunch of different options for importing different types of files. For now, let's simply select to import a file, and you can also use the keyboard shortcut Ctrl and I, and I highly recommend that you do get familiar with all of the shortcuts in Adobe After Effects because they will make your workflow a whole lot faster. Also, note that I'm on a Windows machine. If you're on a Mac, do note that Control refers to the Command key, and whenever I say Alt or Alt on the Windows key, that is the same as the Option key on a Mac. But now, let's click on Import a File, and this will bring up the Import File dialog. As part of the course materials, you will find a zip file that contains a whole bunch of different folders. You'll find audio files, some effects, images, some miscellaneous files, as well as some video. For now, let's simply jump into folder for the video, and you can import whatever you like. You can also just import your own footage to follow along, but I'm going to import walterdance.mov. So simply select this file. You can either double click it or down here in the bottom, just simply select import. And Adobe After Effects will import that file directly into your project. If in your project panel you select the file, at the very top you'll get a bit of information about this clip. So the information tells me that this is called walterdance.mov, which is exactly what I imported. The resolution is 1920 by 1080 pixels. And in brackets you actually see the pixel aspect ratio. Now the pixel aspect ratio means that pixels aren't always square in your footage. Sometimes they're a little bit elongated, but a pixel aspect ratio of 1 means it's a square pixel. So the width is exactly 1 times the height of this pixel. Then under that you'll see the duration of the clip. It's 19 seconds and 20 frames long, and the frame rate of this clip is 25 frames per second. Got a million of colors. It's encoded with the H.264 codec, and there's an audio track, and you can see a little bit of an audio waveform down here as well. And that audio track is at 48,000 kilohertz in 32 bits. But yeah, you'll just get a little bit of information up here in the panel once you've imported your file and once you've obviously selected it. Another way to import files into your project is simply to double click into some empty space in your project panel. So let's just double click right down here. Again, this is going to pop open the import file dialog. And this time I'm going to navigate out of my video folder, and maybe I'll bring in some audio files. In here, I've got a variety of different sound files, so some WAV files and some music MP3 files. And let's just select the chimes.wav. Hold down Control on your keyboard to select multiples, and maybe we'll also select this horror loop.mp3. And Adobe After Effects does support quite a large variety of different media files. And if you want to know all of the file types you can import, down here in the bottom you'll find a little pop-up for acceptable file types. And there's a huge list of file extensions in here, and you can also pop this open and kind of scroll through. So these are all of the file types that are supported by Adobe After Effects, but let's just leave that on the default and simply hit import. And our audio files have been imported into our project. Now, one thing I highly recommend you get used to is keeping your project neatly organized. And if you dump a whole bunch of media files in here, this will just become a really long, unmanageable list. So one thing you can do at the bottom of the project panel, you'll find this little folder icon, and that will allow you to create an actual folder in your project. So let's just click that to create a new folder. Let's call this one Audio. Hit Enter. And let's select the Chimes Wave and the Horror Loop files and drag and drop them onto the audio folder. So now they're just nested in there. Maybe I'll make a second folder as well for video. And this one actually got created inside my audio folder now. So I can simply grab this and drag it out. So it's at the root level. And let's drag and drop the walterdance.mov into the video folder. So I personally like to keep everything nice and neat. I highly recommend that you do the same. It will make your life a whole lot easier.
Another way that you can import files into Adobe After Effects is to simply pull up an Explorer or a Finder window, depending on whether you're on Mac or Windows, and you can simply drag and drop files into the interface. So let's maybe jump into the Images folder in your course materials. Let's select Mars, Venus, and maybe the Moon. And simply drag and drop these images directly into your project panel in Adobe After Effects. Let go. And after a little bit of thinking, those files will be imported into your project. Again, let's create a new folder called Images. And select Mars, Moon, and Venus PNG and drag and drop them into the Images folder. If you want to get rid of media files that you've imported, you can simply select them and press the delete button to remove them from your project. Do note that once you start using your media files, however, that may impact compositions or effects that you've set up. However, Adobe After Effects is actually quite smart and it will indicate how often a certain media file has been used throughout your entire project, so you can see whether it's been used before you delete it. I'm actually kind of missing the Mars now, so let's just bring that back. Let's pop open the Explorer window again. Let's simply drag the Mars PNG back into our project panel. I'm going to drop this right onto this Images folder to import it directly at this location. Now, the last thing to note is that obviously Adobe After Effects does support a large number of different file types. However, not everything is always going to go perfectly smooth. Let's go back up to the course materials and let's jump into the miscellaneous folder. In here, for example, I have an unsupported .fop file, which is just something I've made up. This is obviously not supported by Adobe After Effects. And if you try to drag and drop this into Adobe After Effects, it won't actually let you. It's essentially you can't import this file because this is not supported by Adobe After Effects. Another problem you may come up against is, let's select the corrupted.mov file and drag and drop that into the After Effects interface. And After Effects is actually going to get you an error. It says file corrupted.mov cannot be opened. It may be an unsupported format. Now, I know that MOV is actually a supported format by After Effects, but this file, well, as obviously suggested by the file name, may actually be corrupted. It may be a bad download. So do make sure that you can play back the file on your computer outside of Adobe After Effects. Also, if you're working with MOV files, which is a QuickTime format, it's actually quite a common format when you're recording with different cameras or your mobile phone, you will need the QuickTime codec installed. The codec is essentially the language in which that video is encoded, and if your computer doesn't understand that language, it doesn't have the codec installed, it can't actually play back and process this file. So if you're trying to import an MOV file into After Effects and you're getting this error, do go online, search for QuickTime and install the codec, not the player. The player actually has a security vulnerability, so you just want to install the codec and then you should be able to play back MOV files on your computer and import them into After Effects, but just something to be aware of, just in case you're coming up against these errors. Now that we've imported a whole bunch of media into our project in Adobe After Effects, let's circle back to creating compositions so we can actually start building up visual effects and motion graphics.